Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck and I get to talk to the most fascinating people around our area. Mr. Bell, thank you for coming and being my guest.
You're welcome.
Darrell, when did you first come to Southern Oregon?
I was born in Phoenix, Oregon, in, if you want to know the whole story, April 10th, 1925.
1925, you're older than you look, Darrell.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be 80 my next birthday.
Well, we sure welcome you on this set of Better Life Television. What, have you always lived here in the state of Jefferson, Southern Oregon?
I have 6 generations born in the Rogue River Valley.
Oh, you do?
My granddad, my dad, myself, my 2 boys, my 4 grandkids, and 3 great-grandkids. And now I have a great-great-grandson, but he was born up in the Willamette Valley up by Salem.
That's Oregon for me, Oregon territory,
Still Oregon,
right?
yeah.
Well, when was the very first Bell to come to...
The first Bell was my great-granddad. He settled in Talent, east of Talent, Homestead, in 1859.
Now, you've seen the documents, everything about this you know to be true.
Well, my great-granddad lived with my folks and I till I was old enough to remember things from talking to him. I followed him like a shadow when I was a little kid, you know,
and listened to
listened to everything he said.
Well, who was great-grandpa? What's his name?
Thomas Bell. See, my great-granddad and my granddad both were named Thomas Jefferson Bell. They used to name people after presidents, I guess, you know.
Absolutely.
And so my granddad was actually a junior, you know, but he always went by the name of Tom, and my great-granddad always went by the name of Jeff.
Okay, well, that would keep him straight.
And then after he got too old to farm, my great-granddad, he sold his farm east of Talent and moved right into Talent and bought a house there and run a place called, it was called the Bell House, Board and Lodging. They boarded people there.
Oh.
And the old house was just about to fall down, and it's been 3 or 4 years ago, some people from California bought it, and Talent Historical Society called me because they said that they'd like to get a hold of me they wanted to restore the house. And of course I had pictures of it, even with my great-granddad standing out in the yard. So I give them all the pictures I had so they could see how to build it back on the outside.
So this house of history is not going to be demolished?
No, it's all restored back to original condition, and the people are living in it.
Oh,
and after they got it all restored, they had me come over and stand on the porch with them, and the Ashland Tidings come down and took pictures of us and wrote quite a little piece about it in the Ashland paper.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
It was built in, a fellow by the name of Dan Hanscom built it in 1896, and my granddad bought it in 1906.
Oh, my.
And I don't know just what year he sold it. But then his second wife passed away, and that left him alone. So my folks had him come and stay with us till he passed away. And I think he was 93 when he died.
Well, your family has long life on their side.
Yeah.
And have you always lived in the Rogue Valley?
No, I lived up in Alaska for a while when it was still a territory.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I remember when our flag just had 48 stars.
That's right, yeah.
And
I lived up there about 3 years in the 50s, 52 to 56, something like that. Yeah, and then I did live about 3 years down at Wairika, California.
Oh, well, there's lots of history down in Wairika, too.
Yeah, lots of it. Yeah.
We've been lucky enough to have guests from Wairika coming.
Yeah. And then, since 1964, I've lived right here.
Okay, but so you haven't moved very far from your family roots. across the
No,
valley.
no, not very far.
Where's home for you now?
Sunny Valley.
Well, Sunny Valley is kind of a new community, isn't it?
No, it's well, the name of it has been changed several times. It's just started out as Graves Creek, you know, from the Martha Leland Crowley grave there, but then the name Sunny Valley, I don't know just when it originated, but they had a post office. In fact, Sunny Valley's had 3 different post offices in this lifetime.
Well, I understand that they thought the newcomers wouldn't much like to live in graves.
Well, they probably wouldn't, no.
So they said,
Yeah.
well, the new people
Yeah.
decided they had to change the name. I don't know when that happened. Do
No,
you?
well, Jimmy Toogood was the first guy to settle there, and I think he settled there in probably not long after the first wagon train in 1846.
Well, when you say Jimmy Toogood, there's a book about him, isn't there?
Yeah, our local historian out there, Larry McLean, wrote a book on the whole Sunny Valley area, and it's called First There Was Toogood because he was the first settler there.
And where could we get a book? First There Was
Well,
Toogood?
you can get them at the Applegate Trail Interpretive Center Museum.
Oh, yes. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell us about the museum?
Yeah. Well, it's a thing everybody needs to see, really, because it's of all the different museums and interpretive centers, there's several of them in the state of Oregon. They don't pertain to the Applegate Trail, but other things, Oregon Trail and whatnot. But we have lots of people come, and some of them from all over the world. And a lot of them have seen about every museum in the state, and they all say they're as impressed with ours as anything they've seen.
Oh, yes.
And people lots of times come back for 2 or 3 times because we keep adding different things in it, you know, displays. And like in the last few months, we've added a display with a big, huge big elk, and a whole blacksmith setup, you know. And so a lot of times they come back, and then there's things they haven't seen the trip before, you know.
Right, and you have a movie theater there that
Yeah,
you can
little
see.
3-screen theater, and it's a reenactment of the first wagon train in 1846.
Now that wagon train was called the Applegate?
Well, the one that in 1846, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they come on the Applegate Trail because Jesse and Lindsay Applegate had just blazed the trail through. There was nothing there but a horseback trail. There was not even the first trip through in 1846. There wasn't even a wagon rut. They were just a horseback trail, and of course they had a terrible time getting through. But they made it through, and then they kept coming that way for the next 34 years.
Well, the reason the Applegates came on to make their own road was that they'd had a tragedy on the Columbia River.
Right. Lost 2 9-year-old boys and an uncle drowned rafting in the river when Jesse and Lindsay Applegate come to Oregon.
And like you and me, we'd say there must be a better way to do this.
That's what they figured.
And they moved heaven and earth.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm told that the Applegate Trail was the only one that was blazed from the west to the east, because they were already out west, and they said, hey, there's got to be a better way than to take.
Right.
Because they'd take these covered
They'd come all the way from Missouri to Oregon, and so they made that trip and then got to Oregon and realized it was a hard way to get here, and they wanted to figure out a different way. And one person who doesn't always get as much resignation on the Applegate Trail as he probably should, it was a fellow by the name of Levi Scott. He was an old mountain man here, and trapper, trader, and miner, and everything else. He was here before wagon trains even started coming. You know, he come more like in the Hudson Bay trappers and people like that. Well, Levi Scott was, and of course he'd been back and forth across the country many times, so he went with them, and they made their trail from up in the Willamette Valley clear through to Fort Hall, Idaho.
Well, what I was fascinated about is that these young men decided that they just set out from west and find another way.
Yeah.
And they came down through Klamath?
They come right down right through Sunny Valley, right through Grants Pass. If you could visualize, nothing there then, but through Medford and Ashland, and then cut up over the Green Springs through Klamath Falls, and then headed out across the high desert country and the Black Rock Desert, and wound up at Fort Hall, Idaho. And that's where they hit the Oregon Trail there, and there was 200 wagons just pulled into there that was coming west that wanted to come this way. And
all you'd have to hear would be the drowning of these three that you decide. I mean, they didn't have boats or anything. They just
no, they had to build rafts.
They built out of their
logs. They'd cut small logs and bind them together, and they'd take the wheels off the wagons and lay them down flat and put the beds of the wagons on top of the wheels.
Well, that makes sense. That's lowering the center of gravity, and
then the people would all climb on, and then when they hit whitewater and riffles and rapids, sometimes they didn't make it. You know, they'd
didn't
slide off or turn, or they'd lose a wagon, they'd lose people. They lost a lot coming that way.
Can you imagine being so close to your destination, so very near?
Yeah.
And then finally you're off the trail.
Yeah.
Now, you have in this movie there at the museum, by the way, do they pay you really well to work in that museum?
No.
I heard it's for free, and just like all these camera people here doing Better Life Television, and the lady out front, they're all volunteers too, so we understand the V word. But I've seen you there a bunch of times. You tell stories, and you're interested in more than just the, 19th century museum. I understand you've got eyes towards the 20th century museum. What's that about?
Well, the Radio Park part, you mean?
Right, Radio Park.
That's what it will be. See, the excuse me, the Applegate Trail Interpretive Center portrays things from the early 1800s to the turn of the century, and then from about 1900 on, there'll be displays they figure from about 1900 to around 1950. There'll be that kind of displays in there in Radio Park, and that was Radio Park's kind of their big heyday, I guess you'd call it.
Well, the reason it's called Radio Park, it was a grocery store, a general store?
Well, it actually started out, it was built for a dance hall. And then it went to a grocery store, and then they built several cabins out back and had kind of like a little, what they used to call an auto court. People could stay overnight. And the Radio Park part come from the people that had it there had the first radio in Sunny Valley. And so everybody, it was an oddity to them, you know, and they come there in the evenings and listen to the radio, because that was big entertainment in them days.
Can't you just imagine coming out of the mountains and here is actually sound? I mean, it would have been totally new.
Yeah.
How exciting. Well, I brought a radio.
Yeah.
Now, this one happens to be vintage, and I think it's going to find a home out in Radio Park. It's a Philco radio. It's got, you bet. Look at that.
Yeah.
It's got an aerial, right? You don't call these antennas.
No, not in those days.
And power cord, you don't call that power cord either. I guess it's, well, and it still works.
Yeah.
Now, there's one thing about this I'd like to show off, and that is that it's got a turntable, but I'm not sure that they called it that either. They maybe called it a record player.
Oh, yeah.
But Philco made this a long time ago, and it's just been waiting for a home.
Home, yeah.
Now, do you accept donations from
Oh, yeah.
People who have treasures like I do who would like to share them?
Well, they have a donation thing they go through, and it depends on how you do it. Some people have donated things, and that was the end of it, and some of them want a record of it. Some of them even want a valuation for a tax purpose, and there's a lot of different ways you go about it.
Because some of those things that you have are absolutely spectacular about the 19th century, the old things in the museum.
Yeah, well, like we have a Regina music box in there, which I donated myself. It's an 1895 one, and it plays a 15.5-inch round metal disc. And
you crank it?
You got to wind it up, yeah, and then you don't have to crank it steady, but you wind it up and then push a little lever, and that starts playing. And
well, it's kind of an adult music box, isn't it? A great big piece.
Well, it's not great big. It's a table model.
How'd you come by it?
Betty gave it to me for Christmas one year.
Oh, thank you, Betty. Speaking of Betty, why don't we talk a little bit about her? This whole thing was her dream?
Well, it was kind of her mother's dream. Her mother, she used to read a lot, you know, and study, because the houses where they live was right on the Applegate Trail too. See, the road through Sunny Valley, down through by the Interpretive Center, across the bridge, and on up to where it dead ends into I-5 now, was originally old Highway 99. Before that, it was just a county road, and before the county road, it was part of the Applegate Trail, and the old Oregon-California stage line run over it too.
Right down.
And it runs right through Sunny Valley and right in front of her house. She lives right on the Applegate Trail.
Well, when I had Deb Potts on here years ago, he told me about finding the actual things underneath the bridge, I want to say spikes.
Yeah.
And donating them back.
I got Deb gave me the can of spikes he saved. I got them put away.
You know, Deb was a saver, and we're so grateful for all the things he saved.
I have pictures of him when I was sitting out there with the covered bridge.
Yeah, you know, I was so fortunate to interview him on 4 occasions. That means on camera, because I probably interviewed Deb's 20 hours, and by that time you've built some marvelous friendship, relationship, and fortunately the tapes from Better Life Television were used at his funerals. They were even used at the memorial service in the state capitol. Because we had in his very own words things about history. And,
well, when Deb's retired from the, what was it?
Sawmill?
No, the Senate.
Right.
Well, other people up there in the Senate, and I'm not too much on the government term, but House Representatives, because they have that the same in the state as they do the United States.
Right.
And they got together and they wanted to present him with a roll-top desk. And at the time I was in the antique business in Grants Pass, so they come down and I sold them a roll-top desk at just my cost to give Deb for a retirement party, or present. So he had, I think he still had it when he died.
Oh, and that desk had lots and lots of stuff on it, but he was careful to answer every piece.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, it's the mark that man made, and he struggled with schooling.
Yeah.
He wasn't, in fact, he had to have a little help getting out of the 8th grade, and he was pretty open about that. But look what he did for our country.
Oh, yeah.
For our state. Let's get back to this museum that it's not just one building there, but next to it is a charming...
The old log building.
Right.
Yeah, well, that used to be excuse me, the Sunny Valley Grange Hall, and it set over on the other side of Gray's Creek. And then they abandoned it and went up the creek a ways and built a Grange Hall on a piece of property that the Grange acquired and owned. The original old log Grange Hall was just on borrowed land, you might call it. So then later, a few years ago, the people that bought that place wanted it off of there. And they was about to just advertise that somebody wanted to cut it up for wood or anything.
Woo.
And of course, Betty heard about this and hollered at me, "You get over there quick, and find out about that building and see if you can't get that building bought." So I went over and talked to the people, and after a little arguing and dickering around, we finally put a deal together. And so she paid for the building, and then I paid a moving company myself to move it over there. And when we put down new foundation, they moved it over the whole building at one time.
Oh, they did? Just picked it up?
Well, we had to take the roof off, but they brought the whole log building at one time, yeah.
Did it come through the covered bridge, or?
No, we had to go around.
Go around?
Yeah, come around.
I-5?
Huh?
Come on I-5?
No, we couldn't go on I-5. We had to go down, it'd actually be like down Leland Road and then up that frontage road and around by the store and station and down to towards the covered bridge. And then we pulled in there, and when we made the foundation, we left the ends V'd, not all the way solid across, and he drove right through and set it right down on a new foundation. Then we put back the same original pole trusses and everything, and then we did have to put new sheeting and roof on it. But other than that, it's all, even the floor is all original, everything.
Well,
it's just like they built it.
I was so lucky to go to a wedding in there on Christmas Day.
Did you?
It was really, I mean, it's available for rent, isn't it? If you want to have your kids picnic there or your family get together, you want to have a church social.
We just had a boy that used to work for us, but he works now on a ranch up out of Wolf Creek, but he worked for us a long time. He just had his 50th birthday party in there the other night.
Oh, what fun.
But we've had Christmas parties, New Year's parties, we've had weddings, we've even had 2 or 3 funerals. And
well, it would be a perfect place to say goodbye to Grandpa.
That's right.
You mentioned Wolf Creek. I got this wolf up in Wolf Creek.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about that place? It was there.
Well, this might sound funny for you, but I never studied much about Wolf Creek.
Well, we know they've got a fine inn there that used to be called a tavern, but when it became a historic landmark, I think that it was always a place to sleep and a place to eat, but somehow it had that name.
Yeah, well, and years before that, there was a place in Wolf Creek, before that tavern was even there, where all the miners and everything hung out of a place called the 6-Bit House. And
never heard of 6-Bit House. That'd be.
It's in Larry's, in that book, about Too Good.
That'd be 25 cents times 3, huh?
75 cents, yeah.
Why 6 bits?
I don't know, unless that might have been what they charged for a drink of whiskey or something at the time. They didn't have that kind of law then, but they had moonshine.
Oh, I'll bet they did.
Yeah.
In fact, that part of Oregon is kind of known for being a little bit out of, how should you say, out of the norm as far as.
Yeah. Well, when you got one time it was just mostly miners, and they wintered alone and all, and they
drank
wasn't
pretty
much
heavy.
else to do.
And they fought a bunch, but they sure worked hard, didn't they?
They worked for every penny they made, mining. Let me tell you that. Some of them struck it rich, kind of easy, but as a rule, gold comes hard.
Oh, it's hard work.
Hard work, yeah.
Well, you've got so many stories that I'd just like to keep you and talk to you about some of those other stories that we can't cover everything.
One thing that I would like to mention that we're really happy with in the year of 2006, which is only just a little over a year away now, the Applegate Trail and the Applegate Trail Interpretive Center in Sunny Valley is going to be on PBS National. They've been filming already for about 3 different years that we've had our annual wagon train days. They've had a camera out there and been taking different pictures, and it'll all be on PBS National in the year 2006.
And I was just lucky enough to be there for the wagon train reenactment.
This year? Or?
Well, I've been three times.
Yeah.
What a treat. If you want to relive history, if you want your kids to experience what it was like to be a pioneer,
yeah,
this is the place. It's called the Applegate Trail Interpretive Center.
Yeah.
Why such a big name?
Well, actually, we kind of say Applegate Trail Museum more than we do Interpretive Center, but the Interpretive Center comes from the fact that it does interpret a certain period of time. Tells the story.
It's just like entering right into history, isn't it?
I always, like I say, a lot of times because it is simpler and people understand it easier too if you say Applegate Trail Museum.
Well, it's more than just one museum, because outdoors you have a covered wagon. You could get your family picture out there. You could get a great place to take the family for a picnic.
Yeah.
You got picnic tables?
Oh yeah, we have 4 of them outside.
And that covered bridge is just a short walk away.
Yeah, lots of time when they're tour buses and stuff, that's part of their thing, is they go through the museum and walk down to the covered bridge, and then lots of times they want fed over in the old town hall, we call it.
Well, let's talk about that on our next show, because
Okay,
I'm excited about that.
Very good, and I thank you. I'm
Bernie Martin Beck saying thanks so much for tuning in to Applegate Trail History, all the way from Sunny Valley. I invite you all to stop by there, and thanks for tuning in.